Hi everybody, welcome to ChinFat. In this episode I'm going to be showing how to edit a scene of dialogue. Now this is kind of a basic scene of dialogue. I'm just going over the basics here. Typically the way a scene is shot, if it's kind of done in a very standard way, if we look at the screenplay I've got here, this is a scene that we're going to be editing here. But this is just a scene where this guy's wife has passed away. She's being taken out on a gurney by two EMTs, and Brian is talking to a police detective that came out to check out the situation. So we've got Paul and we've got Brian. The detective is Paul, and then Brian is the husband that's there. As they're speaking, it's Paul's line, Brian's line, Paul's line, Brian's line. They have a conversation, a scene of dialogue here. Typically, the way this would be shot is as we're looking at this scene here. If we're looking down on top here, we've got Brian here, and we've got Paul here, and then the gurney kind of comes out from this direction, goes past them, and then these guys have the discussion here, looking at each other. Typically what we would do is you would shoot a master shot. A master shot is a scene that covers your entire scene. So, and that is typically a wider shot. It's a two shot, it's a full shot, it's a wider shot of the two people having the conversation. And then you can see the gurney as it pans and follows past them and lands on these guys here. So you'll see that shot. But the master shot covers that entire scene from beginning to end. So it starts here at the beginning and it covers to the very end, and that's the master shot. And then, like I said, this was a pretty simple scene, and then the camera moved in and they shot an angle over the shoulder from Brian to Paul. So they shot this angle and got the coverage of the scene that way. And then when they're finished, they moved the camera over here and did the same. Got a reverse angle of Brian. Got a reverse angle of Brian instead of Paul. So now we have this master shot. We got the shot of Paul, and we got the medium shot, or I think it's a close up of Paul and the close up of Brian. And we've got pretty good, and that's pretty simple coverage for this scene. But now let's talk about audio, though. This was shot with a single microphone. Oftentimes, if the audio person is capable of doing it or wanting to do it, they can put wireless mics, they can hide wireless mics on the actors. But if there's only a single mic, like a boom, if you have like a boom pole and an audio person that has a microphone on the end of the pole, that is my microphone there. It's a great microphone. Put a microphone on here. So that microphone is going to be boomed over the top of these guys. But on the master shot, typically that mic is going to be shared in between them. The microphone will just be put in between them, and oftentimes, depending on how directional that microphone is, they use an indoor mic, which is a shorter mic, like a shorter length mic will have a wider area that it picks up audio. If you have a longer mic, longer shotgun mic, you're going to get more of a very directional. These are really nice microphones for outside, and these are really nice microphones for a controllable environment where you have, like, if you're indoor and you can control the audio. They have the wider patterns. This one has a semi medium pattern microphone. When the microphone's over the top of them, it picked up both their audio okay, but that wasn't the best audio. The best audio happens to be when you're getting these close-ups and medium shots. When we're on this camera here on Brian, the microphone is going to be pointed at his face the entire time. So you're going to have that microphone pointed right at Brian's face while the camera is on him. This is kind of a general rule with if you're shooting with a boom. The boom microphone is always pointed at the actor where the camera is pointing. If somebody walked into the scene and the camera quickly panned over to another person, that microphone would pan over with the camera to pick up that other person. And then when the camera moves over to this side, right here, then the microphone is now on Paul the entire time. Sorry, I'm making a big mess here. But that microphone is pointed at Paul's mouth and picking up his audio. So the point being is that the best audio you're going to get for Brian is going to be when the camera is on him. And when the best audio for Paul is going to be when the camera is on him. And the goal of the editor when you're editing dialogue is to get the best audio first, and then you can edit it visually later. So with that kind of being explained, let's move into our footage here. I'm going to put this in icon view here. And we're going to look at our footage. I move my mouse over that screen and hit the tilde above the tab key, and it makes it go full screen. So the temptation here is, typically with a scene, you usually start off by establishing, and usually establishing shots will show a wider shot. So the instinct would be to start with a wide shot, and then maybe you go into close-up and it cuts back and forth, and then at the end, maybe you go back to a wide shot to reestablish. So you go wide shot, close-up, 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 and then at the end back to a wide shot. That would be the kind of the typical way of editing it. Now, I'm going to tell you with editing dialogue, don't give into that temptation. We can fix it later visually, and I'm going to show you how to do that, but right now, when you start, you're going to cut to, let's see who has the first line. First of all, Paul, the detective, says, "We'll be finished here very soon, Mr. Parker. I'm very sorry for your loss." So with that being said, what are we going to do to grab the best audio for Paul's line? Well, we're going to go to that line and we're going to grab the best one, which is this close-up right here. So we've got 17A, take 2. Let me double click on this. This is not showing in alphabetical order, so I got to go down to my little list view, sort icons, and list view sort, so it's sorted in alphabetical order there. And I'm going to go to take 2. Take 2 is probably the better one. Let's double click on it, and it's in our source monitor here. And let's listen for his first line. The gurney walks by. He turns and says,
"We'll be finished here very soon, Mr. Parker. I'm very sorry for your loss."
Okay, and there's his line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that line here. I'm going to go back to where, and this is, since this is the beginning of the scene, I can kind of back up a little bit here.
And action.
And action. I'm going to hit I for endpoint. I walk by.
"We'll be finished here very soon, Mr. Parker. I'm very sorry for your loss."
Stop. Right there, this guy's going to speak. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to put O for out point. And now I'm going to hit period to drop that down in my timeline. And we have that line in here. So now we go to the script and the next line. So what I'm doing right now is I'm gathering the best audio first. Before we start editing this visually, like I said, try to avoid that temptation. Try to grab the best audio first. We're doing an audio rough cut first. Take into account also like pauses as well and timing if somebody's taking a rest in between and it takes some time. You don't want to like cut these lines so tight together. Take into account also pacing while you're doing this. Brian says, "Thank you, Valerie's been sick for a long time. I'm just glad she's finally at rest." So let's go back into Premiere. We're going to go to that over the shoulder shot of Brian. Double click on it.
"I'm sorry for your loss."
Okay, and that's where he finishes his line. Now the microphone is pointed at Brian here, so this is going to be, and that audio doesn't sound bad, but this one sounds nice, crisp, and clean. So I'm going to hit I for endpoint, play through it.
No, thank you. Valerie's been sick for a long time. I'm just glad she's finally at rest.
Stop. O for out point, and I'm going to go down to my timeline. I've moved my playhead here, so I'm going to hit arrow down one time to get it to the end of the edit. Period to drop that in, and we've got those 2 lines in there. Next line. We've got that one in there. Now we got to get the best line here of, I guess it's the way to look at things. Still, it must have been hard, blah, 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 blah. So I'm going to look for that next line now, and we're going to keep editing this way.
Thank you. Valerie's been sick for a long time.
So you can hear the audio is not as good here on this angle.
I'm just glad she's finally at rest.
A little bit of echo to it because the mic's a little further away, not pointed at his mouth. So he says,
Just glad she's finally at rest.
Stop. Endpoint.
I guess that's the way to look at things. Still, it must have been hard to wake up and...
Okay, stop. Now, this is a little tricky part here because Brian has just a very short line. He just says, yeah, just because it's a little whisper, yeah. So let's go back to Brian here, and we're going to get just that single line here.
Just glad she's finally at rest.
Here's the detective
I
line.
guess that's the way to look at things. Still, it must have been hard to wake up and find...
And endpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 yeahs there. Period to drop that in. And I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep doing this from beginning to end. So I'm just going to be editing. And what you're just going to get here is just this little back and forth. There's no... And what I'm doing is staying on each person, even though we might want to cut to a reaction of him, which we will do later. I'm leaving the footage in here of just them speaking their lines.
"We'll be finished here very soon, Mr. Parker. I'm very sorry for your loss."
And it cuts to him for his line,
Thank you.
and then cuts back to him for his line. But that's not the way it's going to look visually in the end. I'm going to finish doing this. I'm going to be cut to everybody's line, and I'll come back in a minute and then show you what we've got, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, welcome back. Got through editing this entire scene here, and once again, it's just cutting to detective for his line, Brian for his line, detective for his line, and back and forth until we finally get to the end of the scene here. See, because like right here, and now we can start thinking about editing this visually. Now that I've got kind of the spine down in here, now we can start editing visually. Let's go to the beginning here, and let's show you some techniques that we can use here. First of all, we're going to play through this, and like right here, I would really like to start out on that wide shot, and then eventually transition to the close-up over the shoulder here. So let's start out on that wide shot.
Action.
There's action. They start moving out, and then this guy says his line. But what I want to do is kind of match the timing on this when he
We're
turns his
just
head.
about finished here, Mr. Parker.
The way I'm going to do this is I probably want to edit like right when he turns his head. So I'm going to get this where he's watching these guys come by and he starts turning his head to Mr. Parker here. right there. Now he's looking at him, and I'm going to get that to the kind of exact same point down here. So I'm going to move down on my timeline and get that kind of matched up to where he looks and he's facing him completely, like that. Let's get it right where he kind of gets his face into place, right about there. And now I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to put an endpoint on this clip up here, I for endpoint, and I've got this, and I can go down into my timeline here, Shift 3, and do I for endpoint. I'm going to play through this a few seconds here and do an out point. This is called a 3-point edit. I've got 1 point in here and I don't have an out point. Then I have an in point and out point here. What it's going to do when I hit edit is it's going to take the in point of this clip, line it up with this, and then play it until it hits the out point, and then cuts it off right there. And I do not want to, right now I don't want to put on this on my bottom timeline here, so I'm going to change my source patching. First of all, I don't want audio from this, so I'll turn off the source patching for my audio, and then I'm going to move my video 1 track up there, and it will edit it on the track above this. So now I hit period, and it put that in, like I said, the endpoint here kind of matching up with it when his head had turned. And now I can just grab this and back time it. And let's take a look at that now. So these guys are walking out now, and the timing of the head should match up to when he turns here.
We'll be finished here very soon, Mr. Parker.
And the audio didn't match because it does at the beginning, but then he says his line differently in both takes, which kind of screws things up.
We're just about finished here, Mr.
We're just about finished here, and on this one he
We'll be
says
finished here very soon.
we'll be finished here. So I'm going to have to cut that up because you're going to see that the lips do not match there, and we don't have really good audio for the wide shot because the microphone is farther away because it's a wider shot. But what I can do is I can trim this thing here. But what I'm going to do is, since that head turns kind of matched up, I'm going to select this clip, Alt arrow down. I'm going to jump down to this edit there and change where the edit happens. I'm going to hit Shift T, which will bring open my trim window. I'm going to move this here. I got a separate episode on the trim window if you want to go back and look at it. But basically, I can roll edit this. I'm going to move right in the middle here for a roll edit and drag this backwards and get this matching where he starts turning his head here. Let's see if we can match that. And right about there is where I'm going to do it. Let go, and it performs the edit right there. So now,
We'll be finished here very soon, Mr. Parker.
and I like the way that turned out there. So it cuts from that wide shot to the over-the-shoulder shot here.
We'll be finished here very soon, Mr. Parker. I'm very sorry for your loss.
Okay, so let's show you next step is going to be what's called LCuts and JCuts. LCuts and JCuts, well, we'll show you why they're called that here in a second, but it's where, say we want to cut to him before this guy stops speaking here. Now it also depends on the timing of this edit here. If he paused a little bit more, because these lines, once again, his lines were a little bit different, but let's watch this. I'm just going to hold down Control. I'm going to move my mouse over this line here. I'm going to hold down Control, and it turns this into a roll edit. And Alt will separate the video. I'm holding down Control and Alt, and I'm act that as Command and Option. And I'm going to grab this, and what the Alt does is it detaches the video from the audio, and what Control does is turns this into a roll edit. So I'm holding them both down. I'm going to grab this and just drag it back a little bit here, and make sure that Brian's face is looking in the same direction in both shots. See, like right there, he's got his eyes closed. Why has he got his eyes closed for so dang long? Oh my gosh. But I can pull that back a little bit. Maybe the audience won't notice. Let's play through that.
I'm very sorry for your loss.
And look how that goes over the shoulder, and that loss actually matched up there, which was nice. If you're watching closely, though, if you're watching his eyes, you're going to notice right there they're closed, right there they're open. That's just something that editors sometimes have to deal with. I could just like cut straight to it if I want to avoid that, if we just undo.
I'm very sorry for your loss.
But that didn't match either, so that we just have to work with that there. So I'm going to keep it right there. And this is considered an LCut, where the audio from this clip extends over into this, kind of forms the shape of an L. If you do it the opposite direction, like this would be considered JCut. And we'll show an instance where we're going to use an JCut here in a minute. But now when it cuts over the shoulder, and it looks like he's saying loss right there, so that matched nicely.
Thank you. Valerie had been sick for a long time. I'm just glad she's finally at rest.
So we're going to do an LCut here as well. Because right here, we're on Brian's face for a little bit, and we may wish to cut to the detective's face for kind of a reaction.
I've been sick for a long time. I'm just glad she's finally at rest.
Okay, so I'm just glad she's finally at rest. So what I want to do is I want to cut to the detective early, but there might be a problem here. Let me do the Control-Alt method here and drag this back, or the Command Option, and do it right about here. And let's see what happens with this LCut.
I'm just for a long time. I'm just glad she's finally at rest.
The audio kind of matches there, but not perfectly. And we also have this little continuity glitch where he turns his head and it's not turned there. But the way you can match continuity from a shot to shot, this is kind of a clever little trick here, is if I'm going to hold down Alt and select this video and arrow up, I'm going to hold down Alt and select this audio and arrow down. That moves it down and up and down, and I can drag this over now, and I can look at my audio waveforms and get these so they match up. And I can play these at the same time.
I'm just glad she's finally at rest.
And see how that kind of mismatches toward the end there? What I'm going to do is hit A for all tracks forward, and I'm going to select this past this one here because I don't want to select that one. I want to grab everything from this point and drag it down to the timeline. I'm going to arrow, and now I'm going to hold down Alt and arrow right, and I'm going to get the ending of that lined up right there. See this last portion of the dialogue.
She's finally at rest. I'm just glad she's finally at rest.
And he did a different pacing on that, but now we have some room to do an LCut here. So now I can trim this backwards again, get this back where it was, hold down Alt, arrow down, hold down Alt, arrow Alt arrow up. By the way, I'm holding down Alt when I select it, and I Alt arrow down and Alt arrow up to move those. And that gets it a little bit better matched up there. Now I can do Control Alt, grab this and drag it over, and it was up to about like that point right there where we could match it. Let's see how that works now.
I'm just glad she's finally at rest. I'm just glad she's finally at rest.
And that works pretty well. That matched up pretty well.
I guess that's the way to look at things. Still, it must have been hard to wake up and...
Okay, now here's somewhere where I want to do something different. So I've done a couple LCuts here, but here I want to do a reaction shot. When he says his line here,
It must have been hard to wake up
and then he looks up, and then we can cut back to the detective. Let's try a reaction shot and see what we get here. So I want a reaction shot where he says still, where he goes,
still.
I want to see a reaction shot of him. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this clip down here. I'm going to Alt arrow up. I'm going to hold down Alt and select the bottom one, Alt arrow down, and then select both of them and back time these and look at my waveforms. And right there is where he says still. Let's see.
Still.
Okay, and I want to see that match up. So I'm going to do my same little trick here where I do all tracks forward, select this, and I'm going to do Alt arrow over until the still matches up. Right there. All right, now a little trick here is I can do C for my arrow for my razor tool. Click on that, and I want to get rid of the audio down here, so I'm going to Alt click on the bottom right there, and now I have my reaction shot. Now I can move this back the way I've been doing before, and let's see how that works.
Look at things. Still. It must have been... Guess that's the way to look at things. Still.
And that looks pretty good, and I could work on getting this to match here. I'm going to select that file, hold Alt arrow down, move it down, and now as it plays
That's the way
through,
to look at things. Still.
and see, and I like that little reaction shot there. But let's change the timing of that. I can hit Shift T, and now I can roll out at this to kind of get it to hopefully match the head direction a little bit more. Right, maybe there, because he's looking in the same direction. Let's see how that works.
Guess that's the way to look at things. Still. It must...
And that looks good. And then when he says still, over the shoulder, watch his lips closely.
Still.
He says still right there as well, and it matches up.
It must have been hard to wake up and...
Yeah.
Well, again, we're just about done here.
All right, then towards the end, I probably want to cut back to that wide angle shot for their for when they shake hands, so we can see them shaking hands. So I'm going to go back to my wide angle shot here. I'm going to move down and find where he shakes hand.
Let us know if there's anything we can do for you.
Thank you.
All right, and I want to cut to where his hands they actually grab, and then he says, "Thanks, detective."
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to thank you. All right, so what I'm going to do is I still want to use the audio from the close-up because it's the best audio rather than the wide shot. So what I can do is I can go to my wide shot here, and I'm going to find a point to cue it up, and I'm listening to the... When he says thank you, detective, that would be a good matching point because I can move in and find that one frame. I'm going to arrow to the right until I hear him go like just the first syllable of the T, the first consonant of the T there. Right there. So that's the very first frame where I go, and he's starting to say thank you. So I'm going to hit I for endpoint. I'm going to move down into this timeline and find the exact same point. Right there is the first where he starts saying that. So now what I can do is I can just, I'm already assigned to this track here, I can just hit period and no audio is coming down, and it drops it up there. And now I can back time this to the edit right there. And let's see how that looks.
Let us know if there's anything we can do for you.
A little bit of a mismatch in continuity, but that's easily fixed. But now,
For you.
Thank you, Detective.
and he says, "Thank you, detective." And let's see if the pat on the shoulder even works. Well, that even timed out perfectly. How serendipitous. Anyway, so let's fix this. What I'm going to do is I want to stay on the shot the entire time, so I can do Alt arrow down and delete that shot entirely below it. Now we can work on the continuity of these shots here. So here, as I'm arrowing over toward the end of this shot, he looks down. He is looking down at the detective's hands, and there he looks down again. So all I have to do is trim this excess footage here. So deselect all that. All I have to do is trim this excess footage to the left, make it where he's looking down right there, and Q to delete all that footage to the left.
Anything we can do for you.
And that looks really nice.
Thank you, Detective.
And there we go, and we have an edited scene of dialogue. So let's play through a little bit of this.
We'll be finished here very soon, Mr. Parker. I'm very sorry for your loss.
Thank you. Valerie had been sick for a long time. I'm just glad she's finally at rest.
I guess that's the way to look at things. Still, it must have been hard to wake up and
So we've got our back timing, we've got our LCuts. We didn't really do an instance of a J-cut, wasn't very necessary. And then we've got our reaction shots as well. Everything looks pretty nice. It looks pretty smooth. It's ready to be sent to audio be audio mixed and cleaned up with clean up the audio and balance the levels and whatnot. Anyway, so I am putting a link below that will give you access to these exercise files. You can download the files and you can practice. It's got the script, it's got the footage. You can import it into Premiere and start editing this and try to improve your technique at editing dialogue. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know.